think it's time to discuss your philosophy of drug use as it relates to artistic endeavor.
To keep doing daily videos on YouTube, I need to raise my Patreon and Subscribestar income to a grand total of $200 a month. So if you're so inclined, help a chap out. Zang. It is a truth universally acknowledged that an RPG in search of money must be in want of a new edition. The entire gaming sphere is alive with the news that there will be a sort of a new edition of Dungeons & Dragons coming out. It's not particularly clear at this stage whether we're talking about a full new 6th edition or whether we're talking about a 5.5 edition, what exactly the case might be. My thoughts on this are rather scattered, so this video is going to be rather scattered as well, popping around over different related topics. So here we go. I don't think the timing is right for a new edition of Dungeons & Dragons, despite knowing that it is the sale of core books that is always the primary sales with any RPG. Supplementary material never does as well. Adventures never do as well. I think D&D was the ghost. I think they've mitigated that somewhat by making their books more prestige and having them have more content in them than just the adventures. But even so, that's not really where the sustainable amount of money is. The main money in RPG publishing is always the core books. That's probably why they want to release a new edition, in order to make, or at least one of the primary reasons, in order to make a bunch more money from this peak audience that they currently have, because we're probably near that. That may be the motivation. Maybe they're seeing that the sales of the core books is starting to tail off, which would indicate saturation of the current market, which means you need to look to a new edition to make a lot of money. But I really don't think the timing is right, because they have this big audience of noobs who have come in as a result of Critical Role, who've come in as a result of the COOF and everything around it. People with a lot more time on their hands, spending a lot more time at home, a lot more online games, and so on. So I don't know that instituting an edition war or making all of these people suddenly feel like everything they've bought is old and no longer any use to them, I don't know that that's a good idea, and this is the first time that many of them will face an edition war. So they risk killing their golden goose. At a certain point of saturation, you would think that core books would reach a level of self-sustainability to an extent. Books wear out, maybe not ebooks, but most people still like to have the physical books. They get damaged, they get lost. Other people want to try their hand at being a GM. Other people want their own copy of the player's book for when they make up characters and so on. You would think that would at a certain point become self-sustaining, albeit at a lower level, but corporations often aren't happy with that kind of lower level. But they really risk killing their audience. Now, you can enter a note of caution here. It may not be a full new 6th edition. They're saying it will be backward compatible, so it seems more like it will be a 5.5 edition, like we had 3rd edition and 3.5 edition. Maybe they'll avoid the numbering there, call it 5e revised or 5e complete or something like that. So that does suggest that they're considering the things that I've just mentioned, and they're being a little bit more cautious. So if they are being a bit more cautious, what can we likely expect from a 5.5 edition? Well, I think it would be a consolidation and a change of the things that they have been putting in various books. increase the amount of options available to characters in the player's guide. For example, it's the player's guide where you'll see the most difference. Codifying and publishing and making fully official the idea that there are no particular stat bonuses or penalties to any race of characters within the game, changing the terminology perhaps to be more politically correct, bringing some of the additional races and so on, species, into the official books, removing alignment perhaps, group concepts, things like that they have put out in these other books that they've produced, but to bring it together and to consolidate it and have it all in one place, properly official, and saying, this is how the game is meant to be played, which will make a lot of grognards unhappy, but at least everything will be in one place, I suppose. So if I had to hazard a guess, I would think that would be what they're going to do, and maybe a couple of little rules tweaks here and there. I'm hopeful that they will finally get around to doing an open license SRD update, because the D&D creators community has burgeoned for some reason, even though people basically get ripped off for participating in it. So it would make things easier for that creative community, which the rationale behind the open gaming license was that people producing supporting material for the game help the main game. I think that still holds water. So it would be nice if they released more material into the SRD to make things easier for people producing open content compatible with 5th edition, but I won't be holding my fucking breath on that one. If I were doing it, and I'm not saying that this is how I would necessarily want to develop the game if I were in full creative control, but if I were in the position of a designer at Wizards at the moment, these are the kind of things that I would do. I would make it that consolidation of rules. I would ensure that it was fully backwardsly compatible, but I would take note of what goes on within the D&D community now. So I would look and I would see that a lot of people are doing things with Dungeons and Dragons that Dungeons and Dragons as a game is much less suited for. These are not things that I prefer D&D for, but lots of people seem to be using the game in that way. So there's a lot more emphasis on roleplay and social interactions at the moment, but the D&D system is not really suited for that, for the kind of play acting, theatre kids sort of thing that a lot of people are doing with it. So to make the game better for that audience, you need to lean in to the narrative mechanics like inspiration, which I always forget to use, and perhaps giving advantage and disadvantage for good roleplay and so on in certain situations. That's where I would lean into things, making that perhaps more available, more useful to people. Otherwise, I would be doing things like rebalancing healing and encounters to increase the difficulty, make it a bit more dramatic in combat, and as I said, I would consolidate the material, the species information, the character options and so on. And if I were in charge, I would release, finally, some of this additional material into the SRD. Some speculation that Dungeons & Dragons as a property, as an intellectual property, might be up for sale to somewhere like Tencent or something, in order for them to then develop it into mobile games, computer games and properties and so on. And that may play into why they're producing a new edition. Again, as we say, core books tend to sell the best, so if you produce a new edition in the run-up to making a sale offering, you can probably up the value of your company and make the sheets look a lot better. So I think that's a distinct possibility. I mean, Hasbro might want to get back to their core business of making and selling toys and board games more, and to offload Wizards, which is something entirely different. But it all remains to be seen. Everything is incredibly speculative at the moment. If 5.5 or 6th edition is that radical a departure from 5th edition, which it seems like it won't be, but it's always possible, we could end up with a Pathfinder situation where someone could continue to produce their own tweaked 5th edition and become a rival company that may even surpass Wizards, as Paizo did at one point. But then that was during 4th edition, which nobody liked. So I don't think they're as likely to be as radical and as much of a departure from the traditional game as 4th edition was. But any departures and leanings, I think, are likely to move in the narrative story game direction. But D&D, you can't change it too much without it no longer being D&D, I think. But we'll see. The OSR may have proved me wrong a little bit on that one. Zang.
Tal, friend, and welcome to Gore. Savage and beautiful, John Norman's Gorean saga is brought to life in the Tales of Gore role-playing game and its companion world book, World of Gore. Take flight on a tarn, luxuriate in the bathhouses of Ar, pit your steel against the deadly Kuri, best your enemies and place them in your collar. Tales of Gore uses the D6 system, perfect for both new and old players. You can purchase it from Amazon, RPG Now, or Lulu.com. Ta Sada Gore!